My stepbrother bullied me for years, so I recorded him and got him expelled. Now my entire family wants me to say I faked the video to save his future. I, 17M, have been dealing with my stepbrother Jonathan, 17M, bullying me at school for the past year, and everything just exploded yesterday. Before I get into what happened, let me give you some background because this is a pretty messed up situation. My mom met Jonathan's dad Harris, 45M, at her company's annual dinner 3 years ago. My dad passed away when I was 5, car accident, and mom had been single since then, focusing on raising me. She's dated a few times but nothing serious until she met Harris. He was charming, successful, and seemed to really care about her. They dated for about a year before getting married. I first met Jonathan about 6 months into their relationship at a dinner Harris had arranged. Jonathan seemed okay at first, quiet but polite. We even played some video games together after dinner, and I remember thinking that maybe having a brother wouldn't be so bad. I've always been an only child, and honestly, sometimes it gets lonely. Everything changed after the wedding and when we all moved in together. The first few weeks were awkward but manageable. Then Jonathan started making these little comments when our parents weren't around. He'd say things like how his dad was basically my mom's meal ticket, not true, my mom is a successful marketing executive, or how I was probably desperate for a father figure. I have great memories of my dad and several photo albums my grandmother gave me. At first, I tried to ignore it, thinking he was just adjusting to the new situation. But the comments kept getting worse. He'd make fun of me for having my dad's pictures in my room, saying I needed to get over it because his dad was my father now. He'd tell me I was lucky they even let me live in their house because technically, Harris had bought it. They actually bought it together after selling both their old houses. When I tried telling mom about this, she'd say I was being too sensitive and that Jonathan was just trying to adjust to having a new family member. The real nightmare started when Jonathan transferred to my school at the beginning of this academic year. Our parents thought it would be good for brotherly bonding if we went to the same school. Jonathan is the typical popular kid, he plays football, has a huge friend group, and basically owns the social scene. I'm more into academics and computer programming, and I have a small group of friends who share my interests. Jonathan started spreading all these rumors about me at school. He told people I cry myself to sleep calling for my dead dad. I don't, that I desperately try to get his dad to like me, I actually keep my distance from Harris out of respect for my dad's memory, and that I'm jealous of him because he has a real father. It got so bad that even people I didn't know would come up to me and ask if I needed a hug because they'd heard about my emotional issues. The physical stuff started small. He'd bump into me in hallways, claiming it was an accident. He'd knock my books down and say sorry in this fake voice that made his friends laugh. But it got worse. One time, he accidentally spilled his energy drink all over my laptop in the cafeteria. That laptop had all my programming projects on it, and while I managed to save the hard drive, the laptop itself was ruined. When I told mom and Harris, Jonathan put on this innocent act about how it was just an accident and offered to let me use his old laptop. They believed him and told me I was making too big a deal about it. Even my Aunt Sarah, mom's sister, who used to be really close to me and would always take my side, started saying I needed to try harder to bond with Jonathan. She'd say stuff like he's just being a typical teenage boy and you're too sensitive just like your father was. That last comment really hurt because my dad was always my hero, and hearing her use him as a way to criticize me was just wrong. About a month ago, things got really bad. Jonathan and his friends cornered me in the boys' locker room after gym class. They weren't hitting me, but they were pushing me around, knocking my glasses off, and making fun of how I couldn't even fight back like a real man. That's when I decided I'd had enough. I started secretly recording everything on my phone whenever Jonathan was around. I knew it might not be the right thing to do, but I was desperate. No one believed me when I just told them what was happening. 2 weeks ago, I got exactly what I needed. Jonathan and his friends were harassing this freshman kid, Tommy. Tommy is really small for his age and kind of shy. They were playing keep away with his backpack, throwing it over his head while he tried to jump and catch it. They were calling him names, saying stuff like what's wrong, short stack? Can't reach it? I recorded everything. But then Jonathan took it too far. When Tommy finally managed to grab his bag, Jonathan got angry and pushed him hard. Tommy fell and hit his face on a locker, getting a bloody nose. I took the video straight to the principal. Our school has this zero-tolerance policy for bullying that they're usually pretty lazy about enforcing, but with video evidence of actual physical assault, they couldn't ignore it. They called Harris to come pick Jonathan up, and by the end of the day, Jonathan was officially dismissed from school. When we got home that afternoon, everything exploded. Jonathan was crying to his dad about how his life was ruined, how he'd never get into a good college now, and how this would destroy his chances of a football scholarship. Harris was furious with me, yelling about how I had betrayed family and how I was just jealous of Jonathan's success. But the worst part? My mom took their side. She actually told me I should have come to them first instead of going to the principal. She said I had betrayed family by going behind their backs, and that I needed to tell the principal I had edited the video or something to get Jonathan back into school. When I refused and tried to tell them about all the bullying I had endured, Mom started crying, saying I was breaking up her marriage, and how I needed to think about family first. Harris then threatened to kick me out as soon as I turn 18, which is in 4 months. I couldn't take it anymore and called my grandmother, Dad's mom. She came to pick me up that night, and I've been staying with her since then. My mom keeps calling and texting, alternating between guilt-tripping me about destroying our family and threatening me about how this will ruin my future too. Some of my classmates are calling me a snitch, but others who have also been bullied by Jonathan are actually thanking me. I don't regret what I did because I know it was right, but everything is such a mess now. The worst part is that my mom, who always taught me to stand up against bullies, is now telling me I should have just kept quiet. Ida? Update 1. First of all, I want to thank everyone who commented on my last post. I've been overwhelmed by all the support and needed some time to process everything before updating. These past 2 weeks have been intense, and a lot has happened. The day after I made my post, my mom showed up at my grandmother's house unannounced. My grandmother wasn't happy about it, but she let her in anyway. Mom looked terrible, like she hadn't slept in days. She started crying as soon as she saw me, saying she had failed me as a mother and that she wanted to make things right. For a moment, I actually felt bad for her. Then she brought up Jonathan. According to her, while she understood why I did what I did, I needed to understand that Jonathan's whole future was at stake here. Apparently, after his dismissal from our school, they tried enrolling him in 3 other schools in our district. All of them rejected him because of the bullying incident. The video had somehow spread around, I didn't share it with anyone except the principal, and now Jonathan was being labeled as a violent bully. Mom said Jonathan was depressed, barely eating, and kept talking about how his life was over. She told me how he'd lost his chance at a football scholarship, and how colleges might reject him now. The whole time she was talking, she kept reaching for my hand, but I pulled away. I couldn't believe she was still trying to make me feel guilty about protecting myself. My grandmother, who had been sitting quietly in her armchair during all of this, finally spoke up. She told us something I had never known. My dad had been severely bullied in high school. Apparently, he was a lot like me at my age, quiet, into academics, and an easy target for bullies. One day, it got so bad that he ended up in the hospital with a broken arm. The bullies had pushed him down a flight of stairs. That incident changed him, my grandmother said. After that, he became determined to never let bullies get away with hurting others. That's why he always taught me to stand up for myself and others. She said he would have been proud of what I did, protecting not just myself but also that freshman kid, Tommy. I was processing this new information about my dad when Mom dropped the real bombshell. Through tears, she revealed that Harris had given her an ultimatum the night before: either I take the blame for editing the video and write a statement saying I faked everything to get Jonathan back into school, or he would file for divorce. She was literally begging me to help her save her marriage, saying she couldn't go through another failed relationship. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My own mother was asking me to lie and take the blame for everything, just so her husband wouldn't leave her. My grandmother must have seen how shocked I was because she immediately told my mom to leave. She said any mother who would ask her child to take the blame for their own abuse didn't deserve to be called a mother at all. After Mom left, my grandmother showed me something else, a box of letters my dad had written to me before he died. They were supposed to be given to me when I turned 18, but she thought I needed them now. In one of them, dated just a week before his accident, he wrote about how he wanted me to always stand up for what's right, even if everyone else was against me. He wrote about how being brave doesn't mean never being scared, but doing the right thing despite being scared. Meanwhile, things at school have gotten complicated. Jonathan's friends have been harassing me online, posting edited photos of me with cruel captions, and spreading rumors about how I'm mentally unstable and made everything up for attention. But something unexpected happened. Tommy, the freshman Jonathan had bullied, came forward with his own story. Tommy told the principal about other incidents where Jonathan had bullied him. Then, like dominoes falling, more kids started coming forward. Some even had their own recordings. One girl had documented weeks of Jonathan and his friends harassing her about her weight. Another guy had screenshots of Jonathan cyberbullying him and threatening him if he told anyone. The school counselor called me into her office yesterday. She showed me a thick folder full of complaints against Jonathan from the past year, complaints that had been somehow lost or dismissed. She apologized for not taking action sooner and asked if I would be willing to help start an anti-bullying committee at school. She said my standing up to Jonathan had given other students the courage to speak up too. Harris has been telling everyone who will listen that I'm a manipulative kid who set Jonathan up because I was jealous of him. Several family members are believing him, including my Aunt Sarah. She called me yesterday and gave me a long lecture about how disappointed she was in me for destroying a young man's future over teenage drama. She said the same thing Mom did, that I should have handled it within the family instead of embarrassing everyone by going to the principal. I'm still staying at my grandmother's house. She's actually helping me look into legal emancipation since I'll be 18 in 4 months anyway. We've talked to a lawyer who says I have a good case, especially given the current situation. My mom keeps sending me these long, emotional messages about how I'm tearing the family apart and how I'll regret this when I'm older. I've stopped responding to them. I just can't believe she's choosing her marriage over her own son. Right now, I'm trying to focus on school and keeping my grades up. My grandmother has been amazing through all of this. She even set up a small study area in her guest room for me, similar to what I had at home. Some days are harder than others, but reading my dad's letters helps. It's like he somehow knew I'd need his advice even years later. I'll update again if anything significant happens, but for now, I'm just trying to get through each day. Thank you all again for your support. It really helps to know I'm not crazy for standing up for myself. Update 2: things have taken an unexpected turn, and I'm still trying to process everything that's happened. Last week, I got a Facebook message from someone I never expected to hear from, Karen, Jonathan's biological mom. She said she had heard about what happened from one of Harris's relatives and wanted to meet to talk about it. At first, I was really hesitant. Harris had always painted her as this unstable person who abandoned Jonathan, and I wasn't sure what her angle was. But my grandmother agreed to go with me, so we met Karen at a coffee shop near her house last Saturday. What she told us completely changed everything I thought I knew about the situation. Turns out, this wasn't the first time Jonathan had been involved in serious bullying. At his previous school, before my mom and Harris got married, he had been suspended 3 times for bullying other students. The last incident was particularly bad. He and his friends had locked a kid in the gym storage room for several hours as a prank. Karen had tried to get Jonathan into therapy after that incident. She showed us old emails between her and Jonathan's school counselor, who had strongly recommended psychological evaluation and counseling for Jonathan's aggressive behavior. But Harris had refused, saying Karen was trying to make their son look weak and damaged. The real shocker came when she showed us the documents from their custody battle. Harris hadn't won full custody because he was the better parent. He won because he had better lawyers and had convinced the court that Karen's insistence on therapy meant she was trying to create problems where there weren't any. He had actually moved Jonathan to my school not just because of the marriage, but because his old school had threatened to expel him if he had one more incident. Karen broke down crying while telling us all this. She said she had tried to stay in Jonathan's life, but Harris had threatened her with legal action if she interfered in Jonathan's life or tried to contact his school. She apologized to me repeatedly for not speaking up sooner, saying she had been too afraid of Harris to do anything. This explained so much about why Harris was so quick to threaten divorce if I didn't take the blame. He's done this before. He's more interested in protecting Jonathan's reputation than actually helping him deal with his issues. It's a pattern he's been repeating for years. I showed all this information to my mom last night. I wasn't sure if she'd believe it, but Karen had given us copies of everything, the school reports, the emails, the court documents, everything. Mom read through it all, and for the first time since this whole mess started, I saw real understanding dawn on her face. She finally broke down and admitted that she'd been seeing signs of Jonathan's behavior even before the school incident, but she'd been too afraid of losing Harris to acknowledge them. She told me about times she'd overheard Jonathan being cruel to other kids when he thought no adults were around, about how some parents had stopped letting their kids come to our house for study groups, about how she'd noticed I'd become withdrawn and anxious but had convinced herself it was just teenage stuff. Today, Mom moved out of Harris's house. She's staying with Aunt Sarah, yes, the same one who criticized me. She's changed her tune completely after seeing the evidence. Mom's already filed for divorce, but not because of Harris's ultimatum. She says she can't be with someone who would protect a bully at the expense of other children, even if that child isn't his. Karen is working with her lawyers to get the custody arrangement reviewed. She wants to get Jonathan into the therapy he should have had years ago and transfer him to a school in her state, where she's already talked to counselors about his history and needs. Harris is absolutely furious about all of this coming out. The most surprising part? Jonathan's old school has reached out to our principal. Apparently, they're doing an investigation into how Jonathan's bullying complaints were handled, and why reports of his behavior were lost or ignored. There's some suggestion that Harris might have had something to do with that, but nothing's proven yet. I'm still processing all of this. In a way, it's a relief to know that I wasn't crazy, that there was a whole history behind Jonathan's behavior that I never knew about. But it's also sad to think that maybe if Jonathan had gotten help years ago when Karen first noticed the problems, none of this would have happened. My mom keeps apologizing, saying she should have protected me better. We're not okay yet, there's too much hurt there, but at least now she understands why what she asked me to do was so wrong. She's talking about getting counseling for herself to understand why she was so willing to ignore the signs. I'll update again if anything major happens, but for now, I'm just trying to focus on finishing the school year strong. My grandmother says I should be proud of myself, not just for standing up to Jonathan, but for being the one to finally break this cycle of silence that had been protecting him for years. Update 3: It's been 3 months since my last update, and life has finally started settling into a new normal. A lot has changed, and I felt I should give you all a final update. I moved back in with my mom about a month ago after she got her own place. The apartment is smaller than our old house, but it feels more like home somehow. She's still apologizing almost every day, and while I've forgiven her, our relationship isn't the same. There's this caution between us now, like we're both afraid of saying the wrong thing. We started family counseling 2 weeks ago, my choice, surprisingly. The counselor is helping us learn how to trust each other again and communicate better. The investigation at Jonathan's old school revealed some disturbing things. Apparently, Harris had been making regular donations to the school's athletic department, which might explain why so many complaints about Jonathan disappeared. The school board is now doing a full investigation, and several administrators have been placed on leave. Jonathan moved to his mom's state last month and is attending a new school that specializes in students with behavioral issues. Karen has him in intensive therapy, and from what I've heard, he's actually doing better. He sent me a long message on Facebook apologizing for everything. He wrote about how he's finally understanding why he acted the way he did, and how therapy is helping him deal with his anger issues. I haven't responded yet. Maybe someday I will, but I'm not ready for that now. The anti-bullying committee at school has really taken off. We've helped several students come forward about bullying, and the school administration is taking these complaints much more seriously now. Tommy, the freshman Jonathan bullied, is actually on the committee with me. He's become like a little brother to me, the kind of brother I hoped Jonathan would be. My grandmother gave me the rest of my dad's letters, and reading them has been both healing and heartbreaking. There's one where he talks about how he hopes I'll grow up to be someone who stands up for others, and it feels like somehow, even after all these years, he's still guiding me. My mom's divorce was finalized last week. Harris tried to contest it, but once mom's lawyer brought up the evidence about Jonathan's past and Harris's involvement in covering it up, he backed down pretty quickly. Mom's in therapy too, working through why she was so willing to ignore the signs of Jonathan's bullying. She says she was so afraid of being alone again after Dad died that she lost sight of what was really important, being a good mother. The most unexpected development? I got a letter from Karen last week. She thanked me for being the one to finally expose what was happening with Jonathan. She said she'd spent years feeling guilty about not being able to help her son, and seeing him finally get the help he needs has given her peace. She also sent me a check for my college fund as a thank you, but my grandmother helped me return it. It didn't feel right to accept it. I'm graduating next month and heading to college in another state. Got accepted into a good computer science program, and my grandmother is helping me with the finances using some money my dad had left for my education. It feels good to have a fresh start ahead of me. Harris still badmouths me to anyone who will listen, but fewer people believe him now. Some family members who initially took his side have apologized to me, including Aunt Sarah, who now brings me cookies every weekend and keeps telling me how proud my dad would be. This whole experience has taught me a lot about standing up for what's right, even when it's hard. I've learned that sometimes the people who should protect you might fail you, but that doesn't mean you stop protecting yourself. I'm not angry anymore, just thankful for the people who stood by me, especially my grandmother, who showed me what real family support looks like.